Real quick how Abraham had a prophetic vision against the Levitical priesthood, how Yahushua came to fulfill as well as to co-sign that vision. So when we began to look at Genesis 15, Abraham was commanded to take a heifer, and we know that the red heifer is used for atonement and repentance of sins. The she-goat, we know that the goat is used in all of those feast days, and the ram is used for Yom Kippur. When we look at the turtle dove or the dove and the young pigeon, these are for the Ebionites or for the poor. May peace be up on them. So when he began to take the heifer, the goat, and the ram and divide them or cut them in half, he did not do that to the Ebionites offering. When he began to divide those in half, verse 11, and the fowls came down up on the carcasses, Abraham drove them away. This word fowls would either be vultures, eagles, so on and so forth, right? So they came on the carcasses, and Ema began to come over Abraham, which is a deep terror and darkness. And this is when the prophecy became that we would end up being enslaved and inflicted in a land that we knew not of. And we have to begin to ask ourselves why. So actually, let's precept this just a little bit more so that y'all don't think that it's a stretch. Jacob. Let's go to this scripture, Genesis 49, 5 through 7. Because out of 2 or 3 witnesses shall a thing be established. Let's see what Jacob began to say, because this is the father of the Israelites, and he spoke in time and in future prophecy. Genesis 49 and 5, Simeon and Levi are brethren. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. O my soul, come not into their secret. Let's go, 49 and 6. I've precepted this before, so I'm not going to go into all of the definition. But this is their secrets. This is the priesthood. Unto their assembly, my honor be not thou united. He don't want any of their teachings, anything of the Levites. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they dig down a wall. We know that this is talking about Shechem. This is futuristically as well. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So in the time of Moses, Moses gives Levi their own land allotment. Their own where they are able to live and not have their own land allotment, but they're not scattered amongst anyone. They are the priesthood, and everyone has to now tie to them, whereas the Ebionites or the poor were the ones who were supposed to be tithed unto at first. Joshua 13 and 14 begins to let us know. But to the tribe of Levi, he gave no inheritance, since the food offerings presented to Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, and their inheritance as he promised them. Mind you, this is not what Jacob said to do. So we're just going to skip real quick over to the book of John, the 2nd chapter. I think it's verse 17. Or is it 12? And the Jews' Passover was at hand, and Yeshua sent up Jerusalem and found them in the temple that sold oxen, sheep, and dove, and the changers of money. And when he made a scourge of a small course, he drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen and the money changers, and overthrew the tables. So he threw all of those out, the sheep and the oxen. but the doves were able to stay. But he rebuked the one that began to sell for the doves. Let's begin to read. And it says, in verse 16, John 2, and said unto them that sold doves, take this hence, make not my Father's house an house of merchandise. And the disciples remembered that it was written, the zeal of thine house has eaten me up. They began to do exactly what Moses was to take what belonged to the poor, and they sold it for self-gain. The Levites began to take the tithe that was for the poor, the orphan, and the stranger, and the widow, and the childless father in exchange. This also has to do with the fact that the Ebionites did not believe in the sacrificial system. We can begin to see this Ezekiel. What did Ezekiel see in the temple? Ezekiel 8 and 14. We know that the Babylonian captivity, the 6th and 5th century with the writings of Ezekiel. And then we do know that between the 4th and 1st century BC, that these prophecies were fulfilled under Antiochus Epiphanes when he began to make the temple unclean by slaughtering a black boar and erecting a pig in the temple. We also have to begin to realize that these sacrifices in the temple predated these other people groups coming in. Verse 13, and he said unto me, turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations that they do. And he brought me to the door of the gate of the house, which was toward the north, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. So let's just go and see who Tammuz is. I could precept this in a lot more ways, but I'm not. Not right now. So Tammuz or Dumuzdi is actually a god of agriculture and shepherds. And his consort is the goddess Inanna or Ishtar. He would be called Adon. So who are you guys calling Adonai? By the Canaanites. I just want to know, who is this shepherd and fertility god that is being worshipped? It is stated that he is the rising and the falling god. He is a bull deity. Is this not how El is worshipped? He was worshipped in 2000 BC to 1600 BC. It's very essential to know that in 2000 BC, this was around the time when Abraham had already been in Egypt for a while, because in 2180 BC, that's when the famine was in the land and was grievous, and his brother Haran ended up dying. In 1800 BC, you have the Midianites becoming one and the same with the Mesopotamians and the Sumerians. Therefore, around the birth of Moses in 1492 BC, when he began to learn the priesthood from Jethro, the Midianite, Rechabite, Kenite priesthood, he was learning the ways of the Sumerians and the Mesopotamians, line on line, precept on precept. So we began to look at Dumuzdi. He had a cult. Let me just get a quick summary. So Tammuz was a rising and dying god. This is the same thing that is explained in the New Testament concerning Yahushua. He died for 3 days, and he began to rise again. He is the deity of death, rebirth, and resurrection. He is the good God or goodness. And he's not the first one. This goes all the way back to Osiris, who was worshipped in ancient Egypt. In Mesopotamia, in the Levantine area, all the way back to 5000 BC. So this is what Yahushua was coming against. And let's go to Matthew 24, just to prove this, to make it make little more sense. Matthew 24 and 28. Well, this is talking about the coming of the Son of Man and how many are going to come in Yahushua's name, saying that he's the Messiah, and use that to deceive many, right? And the coming of the Son of Man, for as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, see, this is tribulation. This is a sign of great judgment, of great terror, of great Ima, the same Ima that began to come over Abraham. It begins to talk about the sun shall be darkened and the moon shall not give her light and the stars shall fall. So these are the solar eclipse that began to take place during the time of Muhammad. 251 solar eclipse took place. But we're not getting into all of that right now. Let's just prove that where the ego is in the carcass, we're just going to read. It begins to say, in the context of Matthew 24 and 28 and Luke 17 and 37, wherever the body is, there the egos will be gathered, is a metaphor indicating that when the signs of the end of the times appear, it will be obvious as vultures or eagles in some translation gathering over a carcass. So the Levitical priesthood, the slaughtering of them animals, the terror that began to take place due to Levi under Moses being outside of the will of the Most High, then judgment and a place of death and destruction was sent down on the Israelites. Luke 17 and 37, then he said unto him, where, Lord? And he said unto them, where the body or the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered. So as we wrap this up, Abraham had instructions to begin to take those three animals, the heifer, the ram, and the oxen. We know that they are used for sacrifices. He divided them. The carcass flew on them. He did not divide the pigeon and the turtle dove, which is the offering of the poor. Let's just precept that so y'all don't. Offering of the poor. Deuteronomy, no. Oh, Leviticus 19 and 10, and this is why the money changers would end up getting in trouble. You shall not strip your vineyard bare, neither shall you gather the fallen grapes for your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Most High. Leviticus 19 and 15, you shall do no injustice in court. You shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great. For in righteousness you shall judge your neighbors. There's a lot of scriptures on the poor and how they're supposed to be treated. Hold on. Offerings of the poor. Yep. The book of Leviticus, the 5th chapter, verse 11 through 13. But if he not be able to bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, then he that sins shall bring forth his offering, the 10th part of an ephah of fine flour for a sin offering. He shall put no oil up on it, neither shall he put any frankincense thereof, for it is a sin offering. Then shall he bring it to the priest, and the priest shall take his handful of it, even a memorial thereof, and burn it on an altar according to the offerings made by the fire unto The Lord, it is a sin offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for him as touching his sin that has sinned in one of these, and it shall be forgiven unto him, and the remnant shall be the priest as a meat offering. So, Mary and Joseph offered up the offering of the poor, and these were not poor people. And I mean, we can prove this because people are teaching that they were poor. No. Do we not see in the New Testament when Yahushua was getting on the boat, it talked about he had souls? They were having fleets of ships. It wasn't just one boat they was traveling on. These were fishermen. They had their own boats. Even when you go look over into East Africa today, there are a slew of people, and even in India, who just live out onto sea. Mary Magdalene was also a wealthy woman, which is how she was able to pour out all those fine oils and help fund the ministry of Yahushua. So, yeah, there was not supposed to be any, I don't want to do all of this, but we just gonna, just a little bit, animal sacrifices. So it's essential to know that the Apis bull in ancient Egypt represented Ptah, and the Apis bull was used to sacrifice. I'm going to let y'all know it had some connections to do with Mayat, the death and resurrection. And so the Apis bull is looked at as a third manifestation of Ptah, and Ptah also has a human manifestation. So Ptah is the god of creation and crafts, the craftsmen. I told y'all that carpenter in Hebrew is Nagar, and that Mesopotamian is called Nagar. And these words not only mean carpenter, but the root also means black, and that the black carpenter god was ruling over ancient Mesopotamia, and this is the craftsman god. The Apis bull bore the sins of the people. And after his slaughtering, after Ptah's slaughtering, it was believed that his soul was reborn into the bull, which would be Apis. Yeah. And y'all got to know that this took place in Saqqara, and Saqqara literally is the same root as Sakari. These are Hebraic words. And so after death, the Apis bull was identified with the god Osiris, becoming known as Osiris Apis. And that Apis is the same god as Serapis, which begins to continue through Roman times, which is why I began to tell y'all that this worship that Antiochus Epiphanes brought into Greece came out of Egypt. Moses was doing the exact same thing. We need to know that the tribe of Dan was hired as mercenaries to fight against the Shashu of Yahweh. We need to also be aware of the fact that the tribe of Dan was part of the Philistines, the Phoenicians, the Kassites, the Fulani, Peleg, to become part of the Sea Peoples. And that Europe was birthed out of the Igbos. Europe was first called Ebola. So this worship was brought back into the Israelite time. And so when we look at the worship of Osiris with Apis joined together, it's essential to know that Osiris was worshipped right alongside Yah. Osiris was worshipped right alongside Yah as a moon deity in ancient Egypt. And Osiris-Yah refers to a form of the Egyptian god Osiris, specifically linked to the moon. And this will be the moon symbolizing the rebirth as well as the fertility, resurrection, and circle of life. Yah is most notable known for creating the ancient lunar calendar. Is that not what Moses begins to do? He reset the calendar based off of the moon. Moses did all of that. Going into Yah was also worshipped alongside Tahuti or alongside Thoth, god of the new moon. So when Egyptologists began to come and talk to Zion Lex and began to talk to Divine Prospect and tell them that the God of the Bible is actually an Egyptian God, an Edomite God, a desert God, and these Hebraic teachers are not listening to them, they are purposely not listening. These men know the timelines that this God Yahweh ended up appearing. I believe so. I believe so. You can't tell me otherwise. Set began to take over Osiris's throne, and we also began to see that in the Greco-Roman time, they began to say that the Israelites were indeed worshiping a donkey god, and Set is a donkey god. So I hope you guys begin to gather the fact that Abraham began to be instructed to take those three animals, divide them, and then the carcass flew up on them, which is a sign of destruction and judgment. Iman, which is fear and terror, came up over him. Jacob began to curse Levi and Simeon, as well as their assemblies and their secrets. What did David say? Teach me the secrets of your Torah. The secret things that belong to the Most High is the Nis Tarat, literally the terror. Tarot. To stay out of their assemblies. And then due to what's going to take place with those animals, is going to be judgment that is happening. The book of Ezekiel began to prophesy what was taking place in the temple from the 6th century all the way onward. And I know Divine Prospect began to kick against the brothers and say sacrifices was happening by the Sadducees even after the death of Yahushua. Exactly. And it was not supposed to be happening. That's the entire point that the Ebionite brothers were trying to bring out to Divine Prospect, who claims to be an Ebionite. And we know that there are different sects of the Boni. So when Yahushua begins to chase out those who had the sheep and the oxen and the rams, but not those who had the doves, but rebuke the ones who had the dove. When his mom and dad began to offer up the sacrifices of the poor, when the carcasses began to come over as the sign of the Son of Man, These are things that are very, very, very essential. We were never supposed to follow anything that Moses had going on. This is Jacoya.